Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello Magic players, my name is Jumbo Commander and today is the final video featuring the new Commander 2017 decks, and today we're talking about the commanders found in Arcane Wizardry. Let's check out some Wizard Tribal. First up, the face of the commander deck, Inalla Archmage Ritualist. 2 blue-black red for a 4/5 legendary human wizard with eminence. Whenever another non-token wizard enters the battlefield under your control, if Inalla Archmage Ritualist is in the command zone or on the battlefield, you may pay 1. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that wizard. That token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. And, just in case you wanted it, tap 5 untapped wizards you control, target player loses 7 life. So Inalla Archmage Ritualist is just all about wizards. The more wizards you play, the more copies of wizards that you can make, and all for just 1 mana. We're going to be paying extra close attention to wizards with great enter the battlefield effects, so we can have a Panharmonicon for wizards in our command zone. Now, there are a lot of wizards in Magic, and so you think you might have a lot to choose from. We got 468 in this color combination. So many wizards. But I actually think Inalla fits really well with a smaller wizard package. See, when I think of some of the best enter the battlefield wizards, I think of Snapcaster Mage, or Dualcaster Mage, Venser, Archaeomancer, Izzet Chronarch. And all of these wizards interact so strongly with spells, I kind of feel like this wizards deck should kind of be a balance between wizards and spells at the same time. I was just looking around and there's no huge wizard beaters to copy and slam into your opponents. They're all fancy and small, and so I think you need the right spells to support your wizards. And I think this is further emphasized by one of the greatest cards that you need to include, Docent of Perfection, which creates more wizards when you cast instants and sorceries. And then when you flip them, your wizards get a huge buff and flying. It's just an awesome card, but it needs those instants and sorceries to fuel it. Master of Waves is also a wizard that lets you go wide, creating tons of elementals, and leaving those elementals behind even when your token exits the battlefield. So when you're building this deck, pay extra close attention to how you plan on winning. Because tapping 5 wizards to have an opponent lose 7 life is pretty cool. It gives you a little bit of reach, but that's not a way to finish out a game, especially if you're running so many wizards. So pay close attention to that. But I gotta say, one way to win the game is with a 1-card combo. And you've probably heard of this, but it's Wanderwine Prophets. I want to take a second to explain it to you because I feel like it's really difficult and you need to kind of visualize the combo a little bit so that you can figure out what's going on or know how to interrupt it if your opponent's playing it. Now, the reason I say it's a 1-card combo is because Inalla just sits there in your command zone, doesn't even have to be on the battlefield. And then when you cast this Wanderwine Prophets, a few things happen. First, there are 2 triggers. Wanderwine Prophets has this enter the battlefield, champion a merfolk requirement. And your Inalla has this eminence trigger, which is pretty great. Now you get to choose which trigger goes on the stack first, and you're going to choose to put the champion a merfolk on the stack first, and then the eminence trigger on second. So as you go to resolve the triggers, you're going to pay 1 and make sure that you get the eminence and make a copy of Wanderwine Prophets. Now this copy comes in and says, hey, you should champion a merfolk. And so you're gonna use to champion the original merfolk, the original Wanderwine Prophets. And then there's still one more champion a merfolk on the stack. Yeah, you're just not gonna do anything to that. And because the Wanderwine Prophets that this trigger is attached to is exiled, gone, nothing happens. So this champion a merfolk just disappears. So now you have on the battlefield a hasty copy of Wanderwine Prophets that's going to be exiled at the beginning of the next end step. Exiled underneath this Wanderwine Prophets is your original Merfolk Wizard. So you're going to want to attack someone with this hasty Wanderwine Prophets. It's just something you're going to want to do. So let's go ahead and turn this Wanderwine Prophet sideways. And when you connect with your opponent, well, there's another kick-ass trigger. Let's go ahead and put that on the stack. Whenever Wanderwine Prophets deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a Merfolk. If you do, take an extra turn after this one. Yes, I choose to sacrifice a Merfolk. So you're going to resolve that and sacrifice that copied Wanderwine Prophets, and then boom, your original Wanderwine Prophets comes back and demands that you champion a Merfolk. But your Inalla also says, hey, I saw a wizard entered the battlefield, so I'm going to give you the option to pay 1. So this is the same situation we've run into before, except for this is at the end of your combat step. So again, you're going to put the champion of Merfolk on first, you're going to eminence on second, you're going to resolve the eminence by paying 1 and make a copy, and this copy will also ask you to champion a Merfolk. And this sounds similar, right? You're going to champion your original Wanderwine Prophets and thus saving it. But hang on a second. I thought you had to exile this Wanderwine Prophets at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, you do. And so you'll have to do this trick all over again. In fact, the Inalla Wanderwine combo requires you to do this crazy swapping trick kind of 3 times. You play the Wanderwine Prophets first, and then you use Inalla's ability. That's a total of 7 mana, okay? Then you do your combat step, and then after your combat damage sacrifice, you again have to use the Inalla trigger. So that's 8 mana. And then at the beginning of the next end step, it's gonna ask you to get rid of your cool combo, but you need to save it. You need to make sure that your Wanderwine Prophets, your original Wanderwine Prophets, is always under a token. So again, after the token is exiled and Wanderwine Prophets comes back, you're gonna have to use Inalla's ability again to make it around to your next turn. And then you keep doing it over and over again and keep hitting opponents until you win the game. Now, there's some limits to this combo. You need to have an open player, you need to have enough mana, but people are kind of freaking out about this because there's a lot of cool ways that you can cheat Wanderwine Prophets onto the battlefield. And if you're playing in a competitive meta, you're basically going to be guaranteed the ability to hit someone and sort of make this combo work. Because as this combo is going off, you're also drawing more cards, which is kind of cool. So what do I think about Inalla Archmage Ritualist? Well, I think she's pretty cool. I really wish there were some more wizards with great enter the battlefield effects that she can take advantage of. They're all kind of small and piddly, but they all have really interesting and interactive abilities. So I think you need to have a very balanced deck that can be quick to interact with your opponent. But overall, Inalla is going to be a solid choice for Wizard Tribal. Let's move on to another commander in this pre-con, super powerful Kess Dissident Mage. It's a little snappy. Actually, she's kind of a big, powerful Snapcaster Mage. Let me read her first. 1 blue, black, red for a 3/4 legendary human wizard with flying, and during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card is cast this way, would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Oh man, this is amazing because Kess is so powerful every turn casting a spell. This has just got to be a spellcaster, spell slinger, awesome deck. What are we going to put in this Kess deck? Well, I think Kess would make a great Storm commander. Just imagine you cast High Tide, and then you cast High Tide again. You win the game! No, just kidding. But being able to double up on a lot of these important spells in a Storm deck is going to be really strong. Just think of High Tide or Baral, reducing the mana cost of spells. Just spells matter. Or a card like Intuition, which lets you get a card that you need, but then also be able to cast it from your graveyard. There's so many options when it comes to Kess. And Intuition gave me the idea of maybe running a lot of wheels. One of my favorite, Ancient Excavation, you can toss in your graveyard in the beginning of the game to fetch up a land, and then use it to filter through your deck. Wheel of Fortune is also really strong, and Dark Deal even. And now that I think about it, Dark Deal is just fine, even though it's a huge card disadvantage, because you're throwing cards into your graveyard that your opponents can't use, but you have easy access to them. I'd love to run Kess in any of these Nekusar-style decks where we punish our opponents, slowly nickel and diming them as we get advantage from our graveyard. Oh, it's beautiful. And in fact, discard can be our friend. A card like Liliana the Veil can come down and tick up, making everyone discard, but we're not actually discarding to any disadvantage because we can cast spells out of our graveyard. Or if Liliana is a little bit pricey and fragile, how about Necrogen Mists? At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card from his or her hand. See, a lot of people are like, no, I don't want to play this because it's symmetrical, but our commander makes this effect not symmetrical because we just cast everything from our graveyard. So what do we cast? All sorts of stuff. Whatever your heart desires, except for counter spells, because you do have to be casting them on your turn according to your commander's text. I know, boring. But I'm going to be casting some buyback spells. Here's the reason why. You're casting them from your graveyard, so you can pay all of these additional costs like buyback. So I can capsize something of yours, leave it in the graveyard, and then capsize with buyback using Kess. And instead of exiling my capsize, I get it right back into my hand again. So the slow capsize lock gets a little bit faster. You can also cast cards like Reiterate, copying other spells, and then Reiterate buyback from my graveyard, just getting out of hand. And speaking of which, how about the Increasing series? Increasing Ambition and Increasing Vengeance. When you cast them from your graveyard, you get an additional effect. Now, there was a trade-off. The flashback cost was really a lot. Increasing Ambition had a flashback cost of 8 to get 2 cards. But the card doesn't say if you cast it for its flashback cost, you get this increased effect. It says when you cast it from your graveyard. So Kess lets you use the reduced mana cost and get the cool benefit. I love it. What would I do if I was building Kess? I think I might build a Storm deck and then realize none of my friends want to play with me, and then I'd scrap it and build something a little bit more janky. I'd just fill it full of spells, and I'd fill it full of these great copy effects like Increasing Vengeance or Reiterate, and I'd go for big value spells and just cast them over and over and over again and be genuinely really happy about it. Marcel the Pretender. 1 blue-black-red for a 4/4 legendary human wizard, and when Marcel the Pretender enters the battlefield, you may exile an artifact or creature card from your hand or graveyard and put a cage counter on it. Marcel the Pretender has all activated abilities of all cards you own in exile with cage counters on them. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. So this is the activated ability Tribal Commander, and let me tell you, there's a lot of awesome activated abilities out there. Now let me warn you, the one thing Marcel is not is a Necrotic Ooze, and that's because of this little thing at the bottom. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. Now that's incredibly limiting when we're talking about combo, and many people will want to ignore that huge limitation. But let me convince you that Marcel is just so fun, and I think that that limitation breeds more creativity and keeps people from just going with the traditional Necrotic Ooze combos. So let's take a look at some combo potential, but mostly the tappy value involved with Marcel. Oh my gosh, there's so many great activated abilities, especially because we can look at artifacts too. We can put a great mana artifact under Marcel, like Basalt Monolith. If we need to, we can tap him for 3 mana. That's amazing. Or we can actually untap him for 3 mana and use other abilities. That has me thinking of other stuff like Staff of Domination, where you can pay 1 and untap Marcel and use other tapping abilities. That's amazing. Or even 5 and tap Marcel to draw cards. Staff is just so versatile. But one thing you have to consider, Staff of Domination is usually a combo piece. And so part of you is going to be like, oh man, I'm going to combine Basalt Monolith and Staff of Domination, and I'm just going to go crazy. Remember, only once each turn. We're going to find ways to dodge that, but it's a lot harder than you think. Well, you know, thinking of drawing cards, let's just go with it and put Arcanus the Omnipotent underneath Marcel, and draw 3 cards with our commander. But more importantly, he has a second activated ability. Return Marcel to your hand. Now this is great because you can cast Marcel again and exile something else with a cage counter and only add to his awesome tappy abilities. It also lets you protect him from steal effects or evil effects like Song of the Dryads. And you do kind of need some protection because your whole deck is based around these activated abilities of crazy creatures. One thing to note as we go forward, if you look at these abilities, it says 2 blue, return Arcanus the Omnipotent to its owner's hand. And so some of you might be like, well, wait a second, I want to return Marcel, not Arcanus. This doesn't work. Let me assure you it does work. In many cases, the Arcanus the Omnipotent just refers to the name of the creature who has this activated ability. So when you evaluate these activated abilities, replace the name of the creature with this card, and that will help you understand it. So for example, 2 blue, return this card to its owner's hand. All right, let's get into more cool activated abilities. How about Shauku Endbringer? Oh man, this crazy vampire legend has an activated ability of tap to remove target creature from the game, and Shauku gets a +1/+1 counter. Now this card at 7 mana is overcosted and has a drawback, but that activated ability is so much fun. So feel free to go out there and explore all of the activated abilities. But I want to take you through a few of them that you might want to be aware of as you kind of find whatever you want and build just a really fun deck. Well, I think one of the first things that you have to consider is getting things into your graveyard so that you can exile them with Marcel. So cards like Buried Alive, Entomb, Gamble, and Ancient Excavation are going to be great because they get things that you need straight into your graveyard so you can get value from Marcel immediately. And what are you going to put in your graveyard? Well, one of the most important creatures that you can put in there is Aetherling. Aetherling has a lot of activated abilities, but the critical one is 1 blue, exile Aetherling. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Remember how I mentioned how protecting your commander is going to be really important? Well, this protects it, not just from targeted removal, but from board wipes too, because it doesn't come back until the end step. Amazing. And then when it does come back, you can exile another creature and get another activated ability. You don't even have to like cast it again over and over again. You can just kind of flicker it out and then you'll gain so many abilities. Aetherling reminds me of Torchling that has another great ability on it, red to untap Torchling. Ooh. See, the untap ability is great because even though you can only use 1 activated ability per turn, you can do 1 per creature. So if you have a lot of tap abilities, you can also use an ability like Torchling's to untap it. Torchling also provides protection because you can change the target of a spell that targets this card. That's a very powerful activated ability. Now I mentioned the power of Aetherling's exile effect, but it gets even better when you can affect your own board wipe and then dodge it with your commander. Navineral's Disc is just a house. So you can pay 1 and tap Marcel and destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. And guess what? Then you can cast it from your command zone and it's still a Navineral's Disc. Ugh. And when you combine that with Aetherling, you can activate the disc and then in response, exile your Aetherlinged Marcel. Your Marcel disappears into exile. Your disc effect goes off, destroying everything, and then guess what comes back? Marcel at the next end step, ready to do it all over again. Marcel doesn't just have these great abilities to impact your opponent or draw cards or wipe the board, it also combos off like crazy too. The key is that you need to be able to flicker Marcel out and then back in again so that you can reuse all of his activated abilities. Deadeye Navigator is a classic. You soul bond him with Marcel. You do not exile Deadeye Navigator with Marcel because soul bond is not an activated ability that you can use with Marcel. But with Deadeye Navigator on the battlefield paired with a Marcel, Man, you just keep flickering Marcel, and then you can keep using Marcel's ability. Hey, let's tap Marcel for mana, and then flicker him out with Deadeye, come back. Use another ability, kill a creature, flicker him out, bring him back. I mean, the amount of shenanigans is endless. And also, Quicksilver Elemental has just a phenomenal activated ability. 1 blue, it gains all activated abilities of target creature until end of turn. You're going to choose Marcel itself. Now, that's kind of like a mind bend right there. On Marcel, there's an activated ability that says, hey, I'm going to gain my own activated abilities. I'm like, what? Well, that's because it lets you reuse all of them. It gets around that, activate each of those abilities once each turn. Now, some people thought all you had to do was activate the Quicksilver Elemental once, and then Marcel was kind of unlocked to use infinite activated abilities. But rules came down and basically said, you have to reuse the Quicksilver Elemental for every cycle of activated abilities on your Marcel. So you use a bunch of abilities, then you use the Quicksilver Elemental, and it kind of resets everything. And then you can use those abilities, use Quicksilver Elemental, resets everything. I don't know why the rules are that way, but the head honcho said it works, so I will trust him. All right, let's move on to some more cool shenanigans with Marcel. How about dealing some damage? Spike Shot Elder can just blast your opponents, or Hate Flare. A small cost lets you untap, oh, that untap is so sweet, and deal, well, 4 damage, because it's going to be Exile with Marcel, 4 damage to target creature player. That's pretty powerful. Do you know what's even more powerful? Is if your Marcel happens to have Infect with Pestilence Soul Eater. Give it Infect and then immediately pop people for 4 Infect. Ugh. Or you make Marcel a Tree of Perdition. You tap your Marcel to put something to 4. Ugh. And then you play Hate Flare and then untap your Marcel to deal 4. Just an insta-kill. Oh my gosh. These are the kinds of fun, janky combos I love. But this wouldn't be a great introductory deck if I didn't show you some crazy powerful infinite combos. How about taking all the turns in the world? Have your Marcel turn into Anthroplasm and Sage of Hours. Anthroplasm lets you put a bunch of counters on Marcel. Sage of Hours says take him off and take an extra turn. You're just taking turn after turn after turn, and it's just a couple of cards. You can throw those cards in your graveyard so easily. Buried Alive them in there, cast your Marcel a few times, boom, you're golden. The one thing I'm excited about with Marcel is that there are some truly janky cards out there that turned into gems, and I love that. There's going to be such a collection of cards in this deck that has never come together before. Thank you, Wizards, for giving us something so unique and really on the verge of powerful. Like, you can tune this Marcel deck up to be really competitive, or you can play the craziest stuff ever, and it's all up to you. I'm really excited about the flexibility and creativity in this deck. The last commander from the Wizards tribal deck is Taigam, Sidisi's hand. Taigam is not 3-colored. He's only 2 colors. Taigam is 3 blue-black for a 3/4 legendary human wizard, and he tells you to skip your draw step. What? No, let's keep reading. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Okay, I like that. I don't care so much about skipping my draw step if I get to take 1 out of 3 and then chuck the other 2. Black and tap, exile X cards from your graveyard. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. All right, I really like the selection ability on every single draw, a lot more than this creature kill effect, but it's gravy, I'll take it. So how can we abuse this? We can perform some shenanigans because we don't care about draw steps anymore. Oh man, let the party begin. Uba Mask says, if a player would draw a card, that player removes that card from the game face up instead, and each player may play cards he or she removed from the game with Uba Mask this turn. So this forces all of your opponents to just play the cards they drew. You, on the other hand, aren't drawing cards. You're putting them into your hand during your upkeep. Let's take a look at one of the nastiest locks, Possessed Portal. 8 mana. If a player would draw a card, that player skips that draw instead. It's not just you, that's everyone. At the end of each turn, each player sacrifices a permanent unless he or she discards a card from his or her hand. Alright, so this is supposed to lock down the game and basically put you at a disadvantage so that you have to sacrifice the portal and then the game kind of starts up again. But, when you are not actually losing your draw step, oh my gosh, this destroys your opponents, especially if you have other ways to draw cards. Oh my gosh, you just keep discarding cards to keep your portal around, keep drawing cards with Taigam, and not just drawing cards, selecting the exact cards you want. Oh my gosh, this is just going to lock out the game. Zur's weirding. Players play with their hands revealed. If a player would draw a card, he or she reveals it instead. If any other player may pay 2 life. If a player does, put that card into its owner's graveyard, otherwise that player draws the card. Okay, you don't draw cards, you put them directly into your hand. So everyone else has to play under this horrible enchantment, which lets you say, yeah, I'll pay 2 life, and then they just have to discard the card. Oh my gosh. This is so punishing. I actually like Zur's weirding in a lot of decks. I think it's fun to politically say like, dude, I'm not paying 2 life, you pay 2 life. Back and forth. I think it's a fun card, but in this deck, it's just broken. How about Necropotence? You're skipping your draw step for this powerful enchantment, but you don't care. You're skipping your draw step anyways. Or Psychic Possession. You skip your own draw step, but whenever your enchanted opponent draws a card, you draw a card. So you're already skipping your draw step, but you get to draw whenever your opponent draws a card. Sweet! Drawing all the extra cards. Now I know this technique revolves very heavily on having your commander on the battlefield, because if your commander isn't out, then suddenly you're under these crazy locks as well. But if you want to take advantage of your commander, you can just take advantage of that upkeep trigger. How about Paradox Haze, which gives you 2 upkeeps? In fact, this could be a cool upkeep tribal. You could add in the Scarab God and get 2 upkeeps, or Endless Ranks of the Dead, double the zombies. Followed Footsteps, get more things, as foretold, more counters, Herald of Lashrak, steal more lands, Haunted of Stealing Winds, draw more cards. That's really the theme, isn't it? Draw more cards. But you know, Taigam does some other stuff too. He just is great at dumping cards into your graveyard. So if you want to dump cards in your graveyard, you can take advantage of this guy. How about a solid Reanimator deck? Just run cards like Animated Dead or Living Death, or chuck creatures into your graveyard that you know are value, like Wonder giving all of your creatures flying, or my favorite, Vengeful Pharaoh. In your graveyard, it lets you destroy target attacking creature, but then you have to put it on top of your library and draw it again. Ugh. But wait a second, Taigam has you look at the top 3 cards and then throw 2 into your graveyard. So Vengeful Pharaoh will always go to your graveyard and never end up in your hand as long as Taigam has his way. I think Taigam is really cool, granted a little bit underpowered, but very interesting and gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of play. Oh, this Wizards Precon looks like it's chock full of awesome cards. I'm really excited to start tinkering with some of these generals. Alright everyone, my name is Jumbo Commander, and I make Commander content. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, or just giving me a thumbs up, or writing me a comment. I like all those things. I will see you really soon, because there are even more Commander videos on the way.